Just about okay.
Just legal. No, so we started, we started hanging out in groups a little bit, and then there was a connection there, and I'd walk in a room and she'd leave the room. But I knew I had her. So
let's be honest. Okay, so he was the cute young worship leader, and the line in front of the stage was all girls worshiping Jesus. And I was refusing to be one of those girls, so I would go to the back of the auditorium and just worship, and so I was playing the game.
So we were hanging out in a group, and there's this one other girl that was her friend and a guy that was my friend, and I remember it. The guy came to me the night before I talked to Jenn and told me, you guys will like this. This is the part I add that Jenn doesn't add in the story. He says, Jenn, he's talking about himself, Jenn likes me. Talking about himself. And I know she doesn't like you. That's what he said. And he said, my plan is I'm going to ease my way in, because I know this is how Jenn is, And so I just sat there and smiled, and then the next morning, Jenn was in the prayer house telling the Lord she's given the Lord this year. She doesn't want any.
No, I just said, Jesus, I cannot stop thinking about this boy. So I either want to marry him or take all these feelings away. Just that straight away. And then I didn't hear God speak to anything yet. So I walked out of the prayer house.
And I saw her in the parking lot and said, can we talk? So I brought her into my office. Mind you, this is the morning after the guy thing. And I brought her in the office and I basically said, let's hook up. And but when we said let's hook up, it was a little bit more than like let's just hang out and be boyfriend and girlfriend. There was something that was going on, And
he said, what do you feel about that? And I said, I sounds amazing, but I need to pray.
Went home and told her parents and felt like it was a go. And then we got together, and then I proposed to her 10 days later. And my mom basically bought the ring. So we got married, and then our first baby, she got pregnant a year later, and then she's almost 12 now.
And we've been married almost 14 years.
So yeah.
Yeah.
It's cool. Now, tell us as well, how did you both start leading worship? How did you get involved? How did you feel a sense of calling, and how did that grow?
I wrote a song. In fact, I'll play it. Why don't you hold the mic up for me, babe?
Okay.
I started playing guitar as a junior in high school, and I wrote this song, and my youth pastor said, that's a good song, because we were all hippies, and he was a Rastafarian into reggae, and so I had dreadlocks and a beard, and I wrote this song, and he's like, that's a great song, why don't you play it at youth group? And so this is the first song I ever wrote, and I played it at youth group, and then from that day on, I started co-leading with them, and then took over the youth worship, then moved to Reading and took the youth worship over, and then we got married, then we took over the big church we called it worship. So this is the first song, ready? You're the miracle of my life, and you set me free. Well, you sent your only son to die for all to see every day. When you're on my mind, you are everything that I need and more. You know what I'm saying? You're the miracle of my life, and you set me free. Well, right?
It's good, man.
So you got the dreadlocks and the whole.
There you go.
There's my story.
So that's how you, and Jenn, what about you?
For me, we both grew up in church and have loved the Lord our whole lives. And I started playing the piano when I was 5 and singing my first solo at a Women's Aglow meeting. I don't know if you have that here, but and so I just have always loved worship. And I started really becoming passionate about worship when I was in junior high, and a lot of the vineyard, and just really God was stirring my heart for that. So same progression though. I led in children's church, and then I led in junior high, and then high school, and then big church. And so, just kind of wherever I could serve, I served home groups, and both of us were very influenced heavily by so many streams, the vineyard, this team, just all over the world, just Hillsong, just so many Delirious. We ate it up, anything that was worship and fresh. We were at the bookstore waiting for the album when it came out, and just have been so influenced, and we're just so grateful too for just the movements all over the world that are worship, that have just been going for it. So.
And we've heard loads about stuff happening in Bethel, and it sounds amazing. You've seen some pretty special times of worship there, like the gold dust. And all. Do you want to tell us a bit about stuff that's going on?
Yeah, it's weird, but it's
we
awesome.
want to know. We want to hear it all.
We've seen amazing things, and when you grow up in church, you get very, I don't know, you see a lot of stuff, which is amazing, but we have seen the freakiest stuff that we don't understand. And this one time, the whatever you want to call it, glory cloud, whatever, this swirling mist of gold, I don't even know, it looks like a Van Gogh painting. It's just incredible. And it just...
So just explain, because if people might be thinking,
yeah,
what are they smoking? What? But what,
a lot. Just kidding.
Yeah. What is it? What happened?
It's amazing. Sometimes in worship, we'll just be leading worship, and this...
Mostly when it's my song.
Of course.
That's a joke. Not serious.
Yeah, we knew.
Kind
we
of
knew
serious.
Oh, goodness. So it's, all of a sudden, we've noticed it starting mostly in worship, sometimes during preaching, but just this gold swirling mist will appear, and it's not glitter, it's not, it's unexplainable really, and it will and what's amazing is whenever it shows up, spontaneous worship just breaks out in the room, and people just start worshiping, and it's just absolutely incredible. And it had happened a few times, and you just see people on their face, and people worshiping, some people crying, some people dancing, some people laughing, and we just let God do whatever he wants. And his dad said, we don't know what to do here. Let's just let God be God and just worship. And so this friend of ours, they had joined the team, our worship team, and I'm very pastoral, so I'm always checking in. How are you doing? This is weird. And so I just kind of was checking in with them, and people are just worshiping all over the room. This cloud is just kind of swirling, and I just said, hey, you guys, I don't really understand this, but I love it. And they were like, yeah, and my friend's very wise, and he said, the children of Israel probably didn't really get the pillar of fire, but it was there now, wasn't it? And I was like, touche, So I think we need to be expectant. We haven't seen anything yet. God said greater things will we see in our day. And I don't know about you, but that's what I'm hungry for. I haven't seen a sea parted yet. And he said even greater things. So I think we need to be expectant. And I think what you're hungry for, that's what you will eat. And I'm hungry for the things that I can't explain. I'm hungry for the supernatural. I'm hungry for those moves of God that my little analytical mind can't figure out, but I love. So I think that just having that heart that is open and willing to not know what to do with it, but yet want it more than my fear of what it will look like.
I want to look at a bit about the whole thing of prophetic worship. But firstly, I think, it's a phrase that's bandied around a lot. And I think often it's a term misused. Can you guys try and unpack, how do you define, or what do you think of as prophetic worship?
Well, I think anything that has the breath of the Spirit on it, it could be a rehearsed song or an already written song in the right moment. And a lot of times I think we can get it wrong with thinking that it's just a spontaneous song, And that's not true. I mean, it's a song with the breath of the Spirit on it. It could be, here I'm to worship in the right setting. the right timing, to where it just unlocks that element in the room. You know, I remember hearing a story of Tim leading at Toronto, and I think I forget who came up, and they had a little chat, and then he went into Agnus Dei or Agnes Dei, however you say that song, Mike W. Smith song, and then the room just opened up. And that was a prophetic song for the moment. And I think that if we take all that mystery and that weirdness out of it, it's basically that. And I think for spontaneous and Jenn, well, Jenn does a lot of this, but it's just keeping your antenna up, and in the room you get into that Selah moment, which is that moment in between songs where you could go right or left, and you're in that pause moment, and you're just kind of feeling it out, and you're like, I'm just kind of hearing the name Emily, and hearing like, you know, her offering is surrender, and then maybe you see like a picture of like what's that lady who's really famous, Mother Teresa, her life, right, was a life of surrender, and you get a snapshot, and you're not overthinking it, overanalyzing it, but you're just going with the flow, and you take a step out, and you're like, and you sing it. Now I realize a lot of you in your churches probably can't do that, but you can tiptoe into those little moments where you can make up a song on the spot, like a little chorus or a little melody that everyone can sing, and they don't even realize they're stepping into a prophetic moment. And a lot of times that's what we do, you know. And
I think that the word prophetic kind of can seem a little spooky or eerie at times, and I think that that's just the enemy trying to cloud or pervert it. And I think it's real simple. I think that you know, when we ask for the mind of Christ, that we shouldn't be surprised when we get it sometimes. And I think that just submitting your mind in worship to Christ, I submit what I'm doing, Lord, that I'll be a funnel, you know, that whatever you're saying or you want to happen, that I'll just funnel it right through. And I think that when you posture your life as a funnel, that it's just leaning into here. You know, a funnel doesn't have to do much. It just stays open, and whatever needs to flow through flows through. And so I think that if you boil the word prophetic down, it just means encouragement, right? It just means exhortation, and the Father has great things to say. He's encouraging, and I think some people, I think the prophetic has been abused because people will prophesy the negative, and I think that you're missing the Father's heart, because He's so good, and He would never proclaim, you know, anything that's horrible. And so I think that sometimes what you hear, so say you're leading worship and you just get a real sense of you know, depression or something very dark, you know, you can sing out, there's a deliverance for depression here. But I think you know, what we love to tune into is, okay, this is what's happening, but what are you saying about this, Lord? And then to just declare, to prophesy the exact opposite of the feeling in the room. So you are the God of hope. You are the God of contentment. You are the God of, you know, my soul that is satisfied in you. And when you prophesy the opposite, when you prophesy the truth, it's the trump card to whatever's happening in the room that you may be feeling. So I think to be sensitive to what's happening in the room, and to also be sensitive to what God is saying about what's happening.
And so practically, how does that work when you're leading together? You know, how much do you plan songs? How much do you just leave space to go with the flow? How do you let each other know, okay, I got something here, you know, how does that work?
We usually have like maybe a 10-song set list that's just like ideas that we can pull from, because usually we'll have like an order, and then maybe it'll change a little bit. But there's that moment in the worship set where you just don't know exactly what to do, you know, and especially if you've got a little more time, you're leading worship like 30 minutes or more, you know, and you're just like, I don't know exactly what to do. And so that's when you start taking that risk, you know. And a lot of times what Jenn will do is, I'm singing a couple songs, kind of opening up, and then she'll, for better word, leave her antenna up, you know, kind of feel things out. And then in that moment, she'll just kind of go for it, you know, start singing out. And I think through the years, we've learned to honor the point. It's a good picture. My dad used to have a hunting dog, go figure, hunting dog. And it's called a pointer, and you'd go through a field, and the dog would run ahead of you, and when it would spot a bird or smell a bird in the bush, it would stop, and it would like point at it, and it would freeze. And even though my dad couldn't see that bird in the bush, he honored the dog could see it. And so I'm not saying Jenn's a dog, but we've learned to honor the point with each other, to where she'll just go off or I'll go off, and then through trial and error and through being married and leading through the years, you kind of learn that flow together, you know. I think. And
Hey, and just if you've got questions, you could tweet. If you do at Tim Hughes 77, and we can try and include some of these as we go. So if you have a specific question for these guys, do tweet as we go, and I'll include that. But with all of this stuff, again, I imagine it doesn't just happen once you're on the stage. It's kind of something that's cultivated the whole of your lives. Talk about how some of that journey. You know, what is it that kind of maybe helps you to keep your antennae up? And what are maybe even some specific stories of learning to sort of really hear God and step out in that?
I know for me, we both had our own walk with the Lord and learning and having Him teach us through different things. And I know for me, my favorite story is we were leading worship in Nashville one time, and I'd had a really rough day, long day, traveling with the kids. And you ever had a bad day? I'm sure you haven't. You're so spiritual, but I just was not in the mood to worship, if you meet, whatever. And I was driving to the meeting with his dad who was speaking, and we were in the car, and I was just kind of preparing my heart for worship. And I said, kind of mumbled under my breath, "Mommy, hat off, worship hat on." And, real attitude. And his dad kind of leaned into where I was sitting, and he just said, "The problem is that the worship hat should have never come off."
Yeah. If my father-in-law said that to me in that moment, wow, yeah. He's here actually, isn't he? My
Yeah,
amazing father-in-law.
he's
Yeah.
right there. And that one phrase changed my life, because I was viewing everything so wrong. It's not about preparing your heart, it is your life. And changing diapers is the same worship as standing on a stage. Being faithful to what God's called you to, being kind to people. Corinthians 13, loving people. That is worship. It's not something we do in corporate. It is not even music. It's your life, and it's a lifestyle of worship that we have just changed our perspective of how we do things, And I think just hearing God's voice is something that you have to practice. I don't think that one day, you just all of a sudden get it. I think that, yes, there is the audible voice of God. I think I might have heard that a couple times in my life, but for me, it's definitely this still small voice. And I remember being in junior high school, and I was really just, "God, I want to hear your voice. Speak to me. I'll do whatever you ask me to." And I was in a little church service in my church, and I closed my eyes and I was worshiping, but the whole time I was worshiping, I just saw this picture of this couple that was a couple rows back, and my mind's eye, I saw a picture of me splashing them in the face with water, which is so weird. And so, but I couldn't get it out of my mind, and at the end of the worship service, I thought, "I think this is you, God, but this is very weird." And they were very trusted, so I just, during the offering time, I said, Can I practice hearing God's voice on you?" And I took them into the kitchen, filled up a little bowl of water, just like I'd seen in my vision, stood them in front of me, put my hand in the bowl, and splashed them right in the face. And they started sobbing. And I was like, "I'm sorry," But I didn't even have a chance because they just were holding each other. But what was amazing is the second that water came off my fingers, a prophetic word came out of me, and I just said, didn't have it in my mind, and I just said, "God wants you to know that the bickering you've been doing is the enemy trying to separate you, and you don't even know why you're mad at each other, but you come home from work and you're just, not happy with each other, and it's the enemy trying to separate you. It's dissension, and it stops now in Jesus' name." Just like that. And I just didn't know okay, that just happened. I didn't even have it in my brain, and the Lord spoke to me very clearly. When you can obey me when you don't understand, then I can really move through you. When you have to understand everything, you'll never get it right because you won't know what I'm doing. So, just little things like that, when you hear and when you feel, especially practicing with people who are safe and trusted, is a great way to practice. I think that's a big value for home church, and I have a high value for home church. And just practicing them in the little things in your life. Then when you get on a stage, you can really become that funnel because you don't have to know or understand everything. You can just funnel.
I was going to say, do you ever get scared then of getting it wrong? Do you ever have that fear of getting it wrong?
Always, but I think you have to want the risk of hearing him to outweigh the fear. And I think that courage, just asking God for courage, because courage is supernatural. Boldness, it's supernatural. And I think just asking him, when you have that confidence of, I care more that I'm going to go for it than the fear of failure. That's such a big step. It's a chicken line. It's something that you have to cross over. I remember being 11 in a little chapel in my Christian school, and no one was raising their hands, but I wanted to raise my hands, and everything within me. And I just remember standing there at 11 years old going, why do I care what they think? And I remember that day crossing over that line, and I just shot my hands up, and I just was just worshiping. And I knew I would look so stupid, but I didn't care. And I think every person has to come to a place in their life where you step over that line, where you care more about worship and being in his presence and going for it and representing him than what it's going to look like.
Amazing. And Brian, what about you? How have you kind of grown in this stuff, perhaps away from the stage? Because it seems there's different temperaments here as well.
We're the same, dude.
What am I trying to say?
We're exactly the same.
Yeah.
Personality, temperament.
Exactly.
No, I'm kidding. I think, Jesus, if you studied the life of Jesus, he didn't swap into ministry mode before the service, He just kind of lived his life in ministry mode. And a lot of us are like, how is that even possible? It's because I think we're approaching it different. We're approaching it from a mountaintop experience perspective, when we feel, sometimes when we're in worship and you're like, if I could just, it's like everything is heightened and your dreams are alive, your visions are alive, your attitude's good. You know what I'm talking about? That moment where you're in worship and then you make all these decisions. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. And then you leave and you're like, not really. Did I mean that? And so it's like, I think we live from this mountaintop experience where from that we do ministry, and from that we're really anointed. From that posture, God can really move through us. And the truth is, it's not really how it works. God will use anyone, and Randy Clark, a friend of ours, says, God will use little old me. And I know lots of times in my life where maybe the emotion isn't there, but I feel like stepping out and doing something for God, or saying something to someone, or even singing a song that I didn't, whatever. I just heard the small voice of the Lord and sing it, and then watch God do his thing. And I think if you have that perspective in life, you'll see mountains moved, because we're so attuned to our emotions.
Yeah, and I don't know if you guys can both. There must have been times you stepped out and it's been wrong. Yeah. Please tell me that's the case.
Okay, here's the key. Yeah. I think the thing is this, and you touched on this earlier, is when you say, thus saith the Lord, and it's wrong, there's a problem. It's a huge problem. But if you don't say, thus saith the Lord, and you let it becomes right because it's right, then it speaks for itself. And there are lots of times but we could try to create a culture around you where it's that culture where we're all in this incubator, and we're all learning, we're all testing, and we're all trying it out, and we're I get a word for someone, hey, I got this word for you, I just sense this thing, or I feel like the Lord is saying this. But you leave yourself, it's that vulnerability, that humility. It's not, thus saith the Lord, and if it's not right, I don't care, it's right. That attitude is where you get where
And I think it's important to cue in.
He wants to hear where we went wrong, though, too, huh?
Yeah. Oh, you want to hear flops?
Just make sure, we are recording this, aren't we? Just because this is a joke.
I got to tell a story. Okay. This is so good. It's not good at all. I'm sitting on the edge of my seat for this one. Could you like this one? Do you remember this one? Lou Engle?
Oh, God.
So this is
You're
back
gonna like
in the day,
this
and
one.
I was an intern in our youth group, and we went to this thing, and it was an outdoor event. It was 100 degrees. It was just, in Lou Engle, if you've ever heard of him, he's a revivalist preaching, and snot's coming. It was just nasty, but passionate, going for it. And he told all the leaders, the leadership team, go out and just start praying, laying hands on the youth and praying for them.
How old were you?
I was 18, and I was intense, and I went out, and this 12-year-old boy, and I just stuck my hands on this 12-year-old boy. And it was just the way that I stuck my hands on him. That's the thing. So, well, I'm not going to do it. Yeah. I just put my hands right here and on his back, and I was praying for him. And I'm prophesying Daniel and Jeremiah and for 15 minutes, prophesying. and there all these people come around. Yeah, and they just kind of surrounding me, and it was kind of an awkward thing. I looked up, and they're just kind of looking at me. So I walked away, and I realized it was a girl. And it was just terrible. I hid myself the rest of the day. It was so wrong.
Is that what you were wanting? Is that hit the mark?
It was so wrong.
There's a
We
lot
feel
more
so
where that
much
came
better.
from. We could write a book.
I was just going to ask, I mean, it's one thing when you get it wrong, you know, and we don't want to emphasize on the getting it wrong, because it's amazing, obviously, when you get it right. But how do you pastor your teams in this stuff? How do you lead them? How do you help them grow in it and let them make mistakes?
You know, we really try to cultivate a risk culture, and not for the sake of risk, but for the sake of go for it, you know. And I think, you know, we have 3 children, you have kids, you know, you don't want your kids to be afraid. You want them to go for it, and you teach them all this stuff, and they're going to make mistakes. And I think that it's how we handle the mistakes that's probably one of the most important parts. And I think creating a culture of, which we have in our team, of you can't scare me. Anything that happens, like you failing, doesn't scare me. It's your heart. And I think that's how the heart of the Father is, you know. With our kids, you know, we train them and teach them what is right and wrong, but they're going to make mistakes. And it's about how they walk out the mistake of like, I'm so sorry, you know, that was totally off, or, you know, whatever. And I think that just being open, honest, vulnerable, accountable in relationship with leaders, that is a real safety where, you know, I've got people in my life now that are just constantly keeping an eye on my life to keep me like, hey, how about that outfit? Maybe not so much. How about your attitude, how you just spoke to that, your son? Not so much. You know, and I think when you keep people in your life that not only are constantly encouraging you, but who are constantly helping you to stay the course and to keep you in check in all of your life areas, I think that's a really healthy place. Because, see, I'm not afraid to risk, because I know that I have strong people that are walking with the Lord in my life to help me and to shape that in my life. So it gives me that additional courage and boldness.
Great. A couple of questions coming, one from Carl Hernandez, I think. How can you help the congregation and your worship team grow in this? I mean, you said, I think brilliantly, that church should be a home, a family where it's a safe place. But again, practically, from the microphone, how do you perhaps encourage people to be open to space between songs and prophetic? How do you do that?
We have a thing at our church where they have a prayer room where people come, and they're not leading worship, they're just worshiping. It's like a 24/7 thing, and you know, people come and go, and there's teams assigned to that, and the whole point of that is just to sing the Bible and just basically practice the spontaneous and the prophetic and worship, and intertwine prayer and worship and that. And it's a good way to practice kind of feeling it out, you know. And my dad is like the king of like knowing the flow and worship and the speaking. He's just so good at those, like, I don't even know how he does it. And it's because he's done it for so long in that environment where practice makes perfect, you know. And so I'd suggest like having times where you can just have like a small group where the whole goal is like you play a chord progression and you guys just, you know, take turns singing out and just doing whatever, and you'll get used to it. And then you slowly integrate that into the corporate worship setting, and then you let people know, you know, like hey, let's just hold on this chord progression. I even say it. I'm like, we're just going to hold on this chord progression, and we're just going to sing out your own song, you know. And what happens is it slowly becomes, it starts to happen in the Sunday morning setting.
So you do this in your rehearsals?
Yeah.
Why don't we try now? I mean, just show us, like.
All right.
Now he's going to need that.
You going to stand up or sit down?
Yeah, why don't I play and you sing? So I'll play and she'll sing.
We breathe you in. We breathe you in. nations, over all of our cares, we breathe you in. 'Cause you are our strength in the toughest battle. You are our strength. God of victory on a mountain top, you say. You see from a higher perspective than we do. And we want to see, and we want to be more like you. We want to see, we want to be more like you. Help us to love and see like you do. Ooh, ooh. We want to fly, soar to higher heights with you, above all these lofty things, above all these earthly things. Higher, higher, higher with you. Take us to depths unknown with you. You are calling us to the greater things, to the supernatural, to be natural. And everything in the little things to be more like you.
And so I guess you guys, I mean, imagine in your personal worship, it's a lot of that. No,
We
but
wake up every morning and get the kids ready and just
no, I just,
stick in that minor.
but I was thinking about, I guess something I felt challenging in my own personal devotion and worship, that so often you just sing set songs. Actually, the power of just releasing and what you start to step into there, you then can walk into in the public place.
I think for me, it's like getting used to my guitar and not just learning all the scales, but learning how to play it, learning the voicings, and like so that when I get out in public, I know that like, okay, when I go from this chord to this chord to this chord, it's going to sound, and then I can tag off this chord into a little walk down into the same. You learn like, kind of learn your instrument a little bit. That way you can go off the page and everyone's like, was that a song? And you're like, I just made it up, but they, you know what I mean? You
So all of that was just made up on the spot. He was playing whatever he felt, but it was a bit of a pattern, and I just sang whatever I felt. And I think that, like you're saying, I think there's that moment where God just uses you, but it does come from hours and hours of us practicing. And you know, I in my room when I was younger, I would just play the piano and just sing whatever, you know, and it's from that place. It says that David played skillfully before the Lord, and I think that word skillfully doesn't mean intellectually. I think it means to know what needed to be played and play it. And I think that that's what he did before Saul.
mean his playing skillfully isn't learning all the scales and da-da-da-da. It's not how to become your instrument. So the emotion that you're feeling, or the thing that you feel like is supposed to happen when he played over Saul, he just didn't pull out his latest coolest thing. He played over Saul.
And a question from Nick Law about how you begin to facilitate and release some of this in a church setting where maybe they're not comfortable or there's fear around the prophetic. And obviously at your church, you've developed a culture where there's an openness, but you must have led places where people are like, what are you doing? And how do you encourage some of this in those contexts?
Well, I think you're still whether it's a prophetic song or a song on the set list, you're still leading people, you know, and you're not leaving them in the dust, and you're no matter what you're doing, you're always taking that temperature in the room, like how's it going? Are people from the back to the front? And so I don't care if you're doing a 15-minute spontaneous song, a worship leader should be taking the temperature and feeling things out, and hopefully with each moment, grabbing more people in. And so a good way to do that, I think, is like we were saying earlier, like maybe Jenn will go off the page and just sing this thing, and then I'll listen to what she's singing. And so what I remember her singing this from this set is, help me be more like you, yeah, more like you. Something that we could all sing together, and I'll take something that kind of sums up what she's saying and create a little hook, kind of like Here I'm to Worship, like the best song ever, right? Make a little hook that that it includes everyone. So we're kind of going off the page a little bit. We're bringing everyone back in. We're going off the page, and I think there's a humility that we need to have when we're leading worship, realizing that we're not just leading the first row of hipsters that want us to be rebellious, but we're leading grandpa and grandma, and we're leading the 45-year-old mom that had to get 15 kids ready for church when we're leading worship. And so it's kind of like singing in a song that, one of the keys of Tim and Matt and Martin, all those guys, that they wrote songs early off where they were simple melodies that everyone could sing. And I think the prophetic doesn't always have to be this elaborate, crazy thing. It can be a very simple thing that everyone can sing. And if a worship leader that's going to go off into spontaneous prophetic land, keeping that in the forefront of the goal of this is to not only show God to people, even the most wounded person in the room, but also so that wounded person can have a moment and a chance to respond because of a moment that happened.
I was just thinking about what Matt said earlier about the connection between worship and evangelism. And you know how the prophetic can seem weird sometimes. And I'm thinking of that moment that I brought my friend along to church, and she's standing next to me, and it all goes really weird. And then also the contradiction of people who we know who have come to church for the first time, and they just find themselves weeping in worship, and they don't know why. I just wonder if you have any experience of that, people coming to know Jesus through prophetic worship.
I used to lead a street ministry before we were married, and every Thursday night we'd go out and I'd tell them, we're not going to evangelize, we're just going to worship out here. And it wasn't like, we're going to worship for worship's sake, we're going to worship for an atmosphere. And we'd worship and then lock into that zone, and what we found happen is, as you could feel the Holy Spirit, moving that atmosphere of worship. And you know what I'm talking about. Every worship set, it happens, right? Some worship sets it doesn't happen, but the goal would be that there's that moment where it's like that thing settles. And when that would happen out there, and people aren't accustomed to that in the world, that's the thing that we have to offer the world. And we had several times where people would just come in and they would ask questions, what is this? We weren't singing an amazing song, but they're, what is this? What is that thing that's happening right now? Because they don't know what it is. And, pour their drugs out in the trash can and get saved. Because we didn't evangelize, but worship and evangelism are very connected, because people are born to respond in worship to a God that maybe they don't know of, but they're born for worship, to worship something. And our goal is to point people in the right direction. And I think that, that's what, when people come in and they encounter God and worship and they cry, they don't know why. Like, what is this? What is this? They're born for that. It's innate. Yeah. Worship is a result of creation, not a result of education. We're created to encounter God. Even the demoniac on the island worshipped God with a legion of demons or 2 legions of demons, and he was able to worship God.
Few questions coming in. Obviously, with the prophetic, there's something amazingly exciting, and it can't be contained or controlled. But also, there's potential for some of the excesses of our humanness. Again, how have you learned with some of the accountabilities? Maybe it's people on your team who take it to extreme, or a singer who does weird things, or what is the balance you have?
We've sung a lot of weird stuff.
Yeah.
We tell them. We'll just tell them.
The team.
So you'll just sit and say, that's never going to happen again.
No, but
Do you take them hunting with you? Is that what you do with them? Is that?
Say, come on, we need to hang out more. No. We'll tell them, like, hey, that felt like it went a little bit long. Or we'll point out, like, typically, like, this right here was really good. But sometimes what I find happens more and more in our culture is you'll beat that dead horse, and you'll beat it, and 10 minutes later, you're like, that song should have ended 10 minutes earlier. Yeah. So we're always kind of like feeling that. And so we'll give them, like, this right here was really great. It felt like it went a little long here, and you could feel it in the room. Did you feel that? And you try to explain to them, like, did you feel that? Okay, so just be careful of that, and next time,
just
and
coaxing.
I do feel like some people are born, though. I do feel like there's a difference. Some people are born. They're like, God called, it's like there's a call in their life for it, and they just naturally can get it. Yeah. But I do feel like we can all grow in it,
The other thing I'm fascinated about, and I think you guys have really brought it back into the church, there's a lot of conversations here about men and worship and intimacy and worship, and men can't sing "I love you, Jesus," all of this kind of stuff. And then last night you were singing, one of the tweets for how not buff, what was the word? Look at this. This will encourage you, Brian. And Wayne, I know it was you, Cadman. Brian is a tank. Does he use protein shakes?
Not anymore.
Look at that. Look at those guns. Go on,
it's
get
been
them up.
a year. No, I have nothing now. I haven't worked out in forever.
Arms of doom, weights, puts me to shame.
No.
Anyway, so Brian,
that was a former life.
You got guns.
No, he does have. I'll talk for you because I'm married to you, but he has a really healthy, in a good way, like manliness. Like he's very well rounded, and he it's good. It's healthy. It's good. But yet he's really passionate and loves the Lord.
I do also remember he did leave at my house once, and that moose thing that helps you.
Yeah, Tanner. It's great.
Tanner, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So neat.
So there's a
rounded.
Mix. There's
well-rounded.
You got it both, haven't you? Guns.
It's about confidence.
Guns and tanning lotion.
Yes. It's about confidence.
You're like this glorious mixture. Anyway, really,
well-rounded.
Really, my question.
Well-rounded. Yeah.
Really, my question is, what do you guys think about that intimacy in worship? Because I think a lot of what we're talking about here in terms of the prophetic and going beyond singing songs it's about relationship, isn't it? It's about a connection and engagement with God that which involves an intimacy. So maybe you could speak into some of those songs. Do you think the church needs to keep singing them? How do you handle some? Because you must have that in Reading. Guys who like.
It's interesting because it's all perspective, and everyone's from different walks of life. And some of you, you've been abused growing up, and some of you were raised in a really godly home, and some not. And you got all these. Our view of the Father is so drastic, right? And I feel like there needs to be healthy teaching on the Father and a healthy dynamic between the Father and his children. And a lot of times, as a leader, through the years, that we've seen that like one person can sing, I really love you, I love you tonight. And another person can sing, I really love you, I love you tonight. And it feels different. It's because of perspective. And so we try to teach like, no, a healthy perspective of the Father is not, I'm just going to say this. There is zero sexual connotations whatsoever in I really love you, Jesus. And I feel like sometimes it can get a little bit kind of skewed. And I think that's where we need to teach, and train our young men, especially like, and I know that's a dangerous subject to kind of bring up, but especially when we're singing love songs to God, to Jesus, and it's very easy for them to become boyfriend Jesus songs, and it's hard to talk about this because
I think a great it's good. It's really good, and it's not talked about a lot in church. So I think that the enemy would like to keep it that way, and so he won't. I'm tired of things being secretive, and if something is hidden in your life, especially something with wound, it festers, and if the enemy can keep you covered and secretive, he'll just keep you sick. And rip that Band-Aid off your arm and pour alcohol in that wound and get help, get cleaned up. And So, but I think this love thing, I really love you tonight. You know, I watch my kids with Brian's dad, who is this incredible papa. I mean, they love
Santa Claus without the beard.
Exactly. He is just so in love with them and them with him. And it's beautiful. It's healthy. And I think that, like Brian was saying, I think a lot of us do have a skewed father perspective. I was raised with an incredible dad. Brian was raised with an incredible dad who loved the Lord, great man. And I would like to challenge each and every one of you to really dig deep into what your view of the Father is. And so many people place, without even knowing it, their view of the Father on their experience with their own natural father without even knowing it. And I think for us to peel back that experience and really get to know the Father, and he is so kind. He really is like the best picture of Santa Claus that you've seen. Like, he's just so jolly and happy and wonderful, and he has this big belly laugh like, He's just so happy. Yeah. And God challenged me one time years ago, and I think this is a really good thing to do, is to go before the Lord and just say, Father, show me what you look like and who you are as God. Show me what and who you look like as Jesus. And show me what and who you look like as Holy Spirit. Now, obviously, the same thing. It's, you know, I tell my kids, it's like an apple. There's 3 different parts, the skin, the seeds, the flesh, but it's the same thing, just different parts. Which is a simple perspective. But I think for us to really have the Father define who he is and what he's like to us, from that place, it'll give you a healthy perspective of how to worship that is not skewed or, and obviously people are going to bring in like, well, what about Song of Solomon and all of that? You know, I think that, you know, you can take that with what you will, but I think the heart of God is for us to be in love with him, like my little kids are with their papa, because he's wonderful. And I think that that's something that he really wants to bring the church back to, is that healthy, I'm in love with you.
So good. You've talked a bit about family life. You've got 3 kids, and you know, you work together. And how does that work?
Like, when you find out,
yeah, when you find out, let us know.
Yeah, I imagine there's a juggling act that goes on. How do you know how much? We talked about the hats, and of course, it's always the worship hat. But there are kind of little, you know, there are hats. So how do you work out how much is family hat? How, you know, I'm not explaining that very well. You all know what I mean.
We get it.
I think I finally realized that I can't work like a typical person in ministry where their wife stays home and takes care of the kids and doesn't involved with the ministry thing, because we're like in tandem. We're both doing it together. And I finally realized, like, so what if I go in 3 days a week or work 2 days a week and then she can do the other? Like, that's how it is. And when I think I finally realized that, like it's never gonna change. You know what I mean? Like, and yeah. I literally, this is how it's become in our life. Like, it's totally different than other people, even on our staff. Like, some weeks I'll just go to meetings, staff meetings, and then nothing else. You know, and we were really, really busy. We've got the label, we've got Worship University, we've got all these things, writing, got all these, you know, and like the last couple of weeks I've had done the meetings, and I've got my people in place doing things, and then Jenn will meet with the people, and it feels like I'm working half the time, but I finally realized that she's working too.
Good thing, 14 years later. Good. Yeah. Good on you.
Because for a guy, you know, that's difficult, right? For a guy, especially that has an ego, like, I feel like I should be on all the time working and you know what I mean? And so it was difficult for me to finally realize, like, no, we're doing this together. And in order for us to do this together and make it right, I've got to figure out, you know what I mean?
A long time ago, one of our friends who's amazing, Stacy Campbell, a really beautiful prophetic lady, and early on, we just had one little girl, and she kind of, in a good way, got in my face and said, you don't let anybody tell you how this is going to look. You let him tell you how this is going to look. And, you know, really just another phrase in this same vein is one of our pastors at home just said, God has created this day so that you can get done everything that needs to be done. And a lot of times I think the enemy's sneakiest trick is feeling overwhelmed, being in the ministry. If he can get you overwhelmed, then it's just throw your hands up and forget it all. And I wrote this song a few years ago called God, I Look to You, and it came from me singing this song in the car of, God, I look to you 'cause I am overwhelmed. And the Lord said, I used to sing it all the time in the car. It sounded so beautiful, like, I'm looking to you, God, because, And the Lord said, well, if you keep singing you're overwhelmed, you might stay that way. And I thought, I don't want to stay that way. Watch what you sing. Watch what you say. Our words are life and death, and they're very powerful. We really need to watch what we're singing. And so I said, okay, I don't want to stay this way. And God said, I won't be overwhelmed. God, I look to you, I won't be overwhelmed. And I would declare it. Even though I felt that, I would declare the truth. I'd prophesy over myself. And I think in ministry for us, it's really been on almost a weekly basis, us redefining what will this week look like, and so many cookie cutter schedules, the 9 to 5 or whatnot. I think you just need to submit your life to the Lord and your schedule of how is this supposed to look for us, Lord? And there have been seasons I've been home and done nothing but led worship on Sundays. And then there's been seasons, now it's very different. Our kids are all 3 in school, so it's different. But a few years back, about 5 years back probably, I had about 4 things in my life that I was really passionate about. Finishing this book that I'm writing, and doing my own album, and starting a talk show, and just all these different things. And I knew that I'll do them in my life one day. But I watched the Lord as I was praying over it. I watched a CD player, if you will, and I watched all these different things kind of pop up, and I watched the Lord push pause on all of these things. And I knew back then I could do them all right now, but it wouldn't be the heart of the Lord in this moment. And so I just remember going, I'll keep these paused till you unpause them. And I think for our lives, that we really have to be sensitive to what God's calling us to now, and be faithful with that, and knowing that we won't miss it. We won't miss anything, and just really be seasonally minded for what God's doing in you and with you in that season.
Amazing. And that I think could be a word for people here. Might be things that you need to press pause on, and give them a break so that we focus on the big things. Hey, 5 minutes, and what I'd love, just as we close, is for each of you, if there's anything specifically you feel you'd want to encourage us in, or even prophesy over us, something you maybe got a sense of what God's been speaking to you about the UK and beyond, or about this gathering, we'd love to hear it. Or just encourage us. Or Brian, you can just play.
Yeah, just play. I think not forgetting the things, every one of us have a goal and a vision to become. We're here to learn. We're here to, we haven't, none of us have arrived, right? And the goal is to arrive. Well, I don't know if that ever really happens, but
Heaven.
Yeah, heaven. But in your pursuit for excellence and becoming a better worship leader or in ministry, whatever, don't forget the things that got you there. Those moments with the Lord where there's a humility in that, in the quiet place, in the secret place, where even if it's just that 10 minutes or 5 minutes where you turn your affection towards Him, you get off the stage, let's say you do really good and you start being elevated and people are patting you on the back and you write a good song and it starts to work for you. Have those moments where you and the Lord know. I'm going to get choked up. Where you remember and you let Him know that you remember that it's all from Him, and it's all for Him. And I think that's the most important thing, not forgetting the things that you learned on the way, and then when you arrive or whatever, that you continue those things. Because you can get swallowed up in all this stuff, and kind of ride on the momentum. And my dad always, it was 10 minutes to pray, I'll spend 8 minutes in worship. And because when we worship, our perspective changes for life in everything. So go ahead.
I just have 2 quick things. The Lord showed me this picture a few years ago of what happens when we worship, and I just saw the Lord in heaven, and I saw, as we would worship, I saw our praise rise to heaven, and God would absorb the praise, and it would just kind of resound, and we would say, God, you're amazing, you're wonderful, you're glorious, you're magnificent, all these things, and he would just, it would resound in who he was, and it would, in the same motion, prophesy to the world, this is who I am, this is who he is. Our word is, when we say those things, it's not just telling God, it's prophesying it over the world in the same sense, and prophesying it. And so that was kind of one part of the picture, is we were just telling him out of the affection of our heart, this is who you are, God, and at the same time, the whole world. And the other part of the picture is the Lord had this mirror in his armpit. Does God have an armpit? I have an armpit. I'm made in his image. I'm going to go with it. I don't know. But
he does now.
Yeah. So he just had this mirror under his armpit, and as we would worship, that one scene was happening where he was just declaring who he was through us. And the second picture is, as we would praise those words, you're amazing, you're wonderful, you're incredible, they would come and they would hit this mirror and reflect back to us, and he'd say, and so are you, because we're made in his image. And what you worship, you become like. So watch what you're singing. Because we have 3 kids, and we don't want them to come to us and be like, oh, I'm so horrible, Mommy, but I'm glad you love me. You're so great, Mommy, but I'm so awful and worthless, but I'm glad you love me. I mean, can you imagine? That's the worst thing in the world I want to hear from my kids, even if they're acting like that. I want my kids to know who they are and to walk in that. And so not out of an arrogance of heart, but I want my kids to know who they are. And so when we come to the Lord and we tell him who he is, that's who we're called to be also, because we're made in his image. So just that worship, that mindset of when you're singing out, it is not just to sing. You are declaring who God is. And in that same motion, as you declare it, you become like the one you worship. And I think the other thing is just exactly what Brian was saying. The Lord showed me this picture about a year ago of after we were done leading worship, we would walk off the stage. And you kind of rehearse how the night went in your mind, as anyone would. But the Lord, I had an encounter with him after one night of worship on the back of the stage. His presence just fell on me, and I just sobbed and sobbed at the goodness of God and the faithfulness of God. And the Lord started talking to me about what we do in the progression of getting ready for a set and then after. And the getting ready part, Brian says it's like a perfect vacation. You prepare for it the best you can, but once you get on vacation, it's kind of anything goes, and preparing well and then just letting God. And then after that, after the worship set, I saw his heart about our criticism for ourselves and how we can become so, oh, well, this went right and this went wrong. And I just saw us come off the stage from the heart of the Lord, and that we would take what happened during the set and lay it at his feet. All the good, all the bad. And I saw as we came off that we would celebrate all the good that happened, everything good that he did, and that we wouldn't even talk about the negative things. And how we kind of depict the night, and the enemy can so easily sneak in with celebrating the things that didn't go wrong versus the Lord getting the glory for what went right. So just keeping in that mindset of when you're done leading worship, don't self-criticize yourself. Celebrate what God did and lay the rest at his feet. Just remember who it's about and who it's for.
Brilliant. Well, Brian, Jenn, it's been incredible to have you with us. Thank you so much. Let's just give them a huge thank you.